what is connectedness? What does that actually mean? What does it mean during a trip? What does it mean not during a trip?
So connectedness, I still am not very good at actually defining it. Um,
Words do fail, I think, at these levels. I think, because I would agree. Like when I'm like on if I'm tripping and I'm like touching leaves and I'm like rubbing leaves off my face, and then like I'll be sober again the next day. I'll be like, why did I do that? I can't even explain that. It is just, it's like there's like a magnetic attraction there to just like
mm,
trees and animals and nature.
yes.
Yeah,
I'll try and yeah, absolutely. It does go. It's a really, it's beyond, it's a kind of, I can't remember the word for beyond words, which is ironic that I've forgotten that. But yeah, there is a word that means kind of like beyond words, and it very much is. But to try and put it into words. So this is probably the best way of trying to describe it. So when I interviewed people from the first psilocybin for depression trial that I worked on, I interviewed all the participants afterwards. It was only 20. It was a small trial about what had changed in the trip and in the weeks afterwards. And there were two themes that came out. One was that people described going from avoidance of emotion, so being quite shut down, very numb, either maybe taking antidepressants, which can make people feel numb sometimes, just avoiding, really kind of having coping strategies that shut down emotion, whether it's drinking or Instagram or, Netflix or whatever. We all have a lot of numbing strategies.
yes,
So avoidance of emotion, and the experience of psilocybin helped them go from avoidance to acceptance of emotion. So that was one of the themes. But the other theme was that it took people from disconnectedness to connectedness to self, others, and world. And that was a theme that came out of the qualitative analysis, that I didn't really know what connectedness was. As a psychologist, I'd never studied connectedness. Not a single one of my psychology textbooks said anything about connectedness or disconnectedness. But these 20 people's accounts basically all said, I lived in a way that was shut off from, I lived in my head. I lived in a prison of my mind, and I went around my world and I was disconnected. And I only knew I was disconnected when I became connected. And what being connected was like if you imagine the prison walls of your head expanding and expanding and expanding. So the border, the wall around you goes from being your head, and it's just your inner world, to getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it includes your body, your heart.
right,
It includes the whole of your body. Then it starts to include other people. First of all, the people that you know and love, those close to you, but then all humanity. And then it includes plants and animals. And then it includes the whole world. And then it includes the whole universe. And then it's this like expanding, opening of, you are connected to everything. So I
yeah,
created this scale, the connectedness scale, which goes through these 19 items of connectedness. And it starts off with like being stuck in the prison of your mind. Like that's the first item. Like I have been trapped in the prison of my mind. And then it goes through connection to self, connection to others, connection to world. And the last item is, I have felt that everything is interconnected. So you go from being completely separate to completely like everything.
yeah.
Connectedness is like, there's different elements of it, connection to self, others, world, but all together it's this feeling of being part of being part of everything and kind of close to everything. When you talk about the leaf, connectedness to nature is one of the items on the measure. And you feel that you are nature, and you feel not just that nature is something to look at, but you feel that, if you look at your finger and you look at like the veins on your finger and you look at a leaf, you're like, oh, it's the same. You feel like,
So true.
yeah, we're all part of the same cosmic soup.
It's really well said. I'd never thought of it like that. Like we were talking about psychologically how your borders dissolve, but it's also very much like your the boundary conditions between your skin and the environment. Like that's also very true that like when you're not tripping, you have a very clear separation between you and the environment, and you have like a sense of your body, like your proprioceptive body plan is very much restricted to your body. But then when you're tripping, that sort of does dissolve. I think the barrier between you and the environment does dissolve. Be really
Yeah.
curious to know if that's actually because of like proprioceptive changes in that part of the brain that does interoception and proprioception, like around the insula. I'd be super curious about that. I don't know, but you're right that it doesn't just dissolve psychological barriers, but it dissolves physiological barriers, and you do. feel less constrained within your physical body. You do feel part of nature.
Mm,
Super interesting. I'd never really thought about that barrier also dissolving.
mm. There's another element of connectedness as well, which is kind of maybe like transpersonal or spiritual one, which we didn't include in the measure because our participants in the study didn't mention it. Um, but there were two items that there was a group of Maori psychologists, and they wanted to use the connectedness scale because they were doing a psilocybin for, I think it was people that had been diagnosed with cancer. And they wanted to do a psilocybin microdosing study. And half the participants would be Maori and half non Maori. And so they said, we want to find an outcome measure that has resonance with our model of well-being and health in the Maori model of health, which is connectedness. Really, it's connectedness to family and connectedness to community and connectedness to nature and spiritual connectedness. And so they said, yeah, your measure's fine, but you've missed out two very important items. And one was connection to ancestors. And so it's really interesting that
Right.
in this kind of connectedness, as we kind of like, yeah, as our barrier between us and the world seems to thin and we kind of expand, there is often this spiritual connection that happens as well. And it looks like different things for different people. But sometimes there is this sense of connecting to ancestors or guides or spirit guides. And the other one that they brought in was connection to land. And the word they have for land is whenua, and it means placenta. And so it's connection to your land that you live on as the placenta. So I love
Right.
those new additions. And so my understanding of connectedness now has kind of expanded even more, even though this isn't in our validated measure because we didn't get them in time, but to include this ancestral connection to those that went before and connection to our land as placenta. So we
Super
haven't tested
interesting.
it out, but I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I find it very interesting that there's of course cultural differences here and what connectedness might mean based on what is psychologically important to you and your community. So it could
Yeah.
just mean a very different thing: connection to nature, connection to yourself,
Yeah.
connection to your ancestry is really
Mm,
interesting. Do
yeah.
we know how correlated or related like the intensity of someone's spiritual mystical experience is with like the alleviation of depressive symptoms 6 months 12 months down the line? Like, are those quite tightly related?
Yeah, so mystical experience was one of the factors that predicts positive treatment outcomes. So if somebody has like so there's a mystical experience questionnaire, and if you like tick a lot of the boxes in that, then that predicts really good response and that your symptoms will reduce for longer. But the other thing that and connectedness also does, but also emotional breakthrough. So there's an emotional breakthrough inventory measure, and scores on that, I think, even more than mystical experience are linked to having a good treatment outcome. And so the emotional breakthrough thing is um, a kind of catharsis experience. So when I described before my birth reliving, and I never quite had the catharsis because I was fighting it,
Yeah.
you can allow yourself to have a breakthrough experience and like really let go, that kind of surrender and managing to like learn the lesson. That's, I think, the most correlated with positive treatment response.
Super interesting. And do you think it, I shouldn't say as simple as, but is that the story that you're repressing something inside of you for a long time and it's kind of giving you trouble in ways that you don't fully understand and you don't know where the source is coming from, then you have this experience, it breaks through, and then you're just like fundamentally different after the fact? Do you think is that the story? Do you think that's all the story? Is there a lot going on that we don't yet fully understand? I know a lot more research needs to be done, and I think
Yeah.
there's still a lot of unnecessary obstacles and hurdles in the way of great psychedelics researchers looking to do this work. Do you
Mm.
think is that the picture?
It feels like for me that would be very like that feels like that picture is it captures a lot of what I've seen. And I think that and it won't be the full story because we're still learning so much, but yeah, that feels very important. I think one of the big differences for me between psychedelic therapy and like cognitive behavioral therapy is that there is something about that, cognitive behavioral therapy, you meet with a therapist for an hour every week or however long, for however many months you do it. And there might be tears, sometimes you might be able to contact emotions, but it's quite kind of boundaried, and you can kind of, there's something, and it's on the level of your, you're thinking about your thoughts, and you're talking about your thoughts, and you're talking about them, and there's something about that that's kind of the same old story in a way. We're kind of rehearsing stories and learning about ourselves. But there's that quote from Einstein, like, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. It feels like we're talking on the same level of consciousness as the
Right.
mind issues in the first place. And that the trauma, like deep down, that we might need to get to, it's kind of like just on a different level. And sometimes it is our disconnectedness from, maybe it is spiritual disconnectedness or community disconnectedness or just something else. It's like on a different kind of like level to what we're talking about. But there's something about these experiences that just, they just seem to, they're so intense, and they in a way require us to be so vulnerable and to kind of let go of that old story. That when you see people like after a session, they've often got a kind of tear stained face.
Right.
Really been through, they've really been through something, and it's been a challenge. But there's something I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something about like the getting rid of the old story and the politeness and the kind of like, oh, I'm the therapist, you're the patient, let's talk about this for a while. And it's like, get rid of all of that.
Yeah.
It's like more it's like a birth experience. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. When you see someone who's just given birth, they're kind of covered in it does not look pretty in that room, but their eyes are shining. They've been through a physical, visceral experience. And it's a bit like that. It's getting rid of
Yeah.
lightness and just getting to the primal, whatever needs to be expressed. And there's something about, as a therapist, going beyond the kind of like politeness into something really raw and human,
Yeah.
thing most of us really need.
The first time I ever did mushrooms was in Vancouver on this famous beach called Wreck Beach. And there's a guy down there selling truffles. And I took it, and I remember in the trip I had the most insane urge to get completely naked. This is a random weird thing to say. It's a nude beach, so this was legal. And this is what people do on this beach is they take mushrooms, they do like naked yoga, and I'm honestly like, fair play, you're living life. I walked down there I was living beside there for a couple of months, and I walked down, and there was a bunch of 80-year-olds doing naked mushroom yoga at like 8 a.m. And I'm like, you're living life properly. I'm not doing life properly. This is what I want to do. But I totally resonate with that. For some reason, I just had the complete urge to get completely naked and like run around. It's such a random thing to say, but it's true. And there's a primal connection aspect there. And again, it is nude beach. This was legal. Don't do this in public in places that it's not legal to do. But yeah, I relate with that, and I think it was cathartic because I think as well my upbringing, and possibly yours as well, being British, is like we live in such a sort of such a restricted, boundaried life. I think, and I
Yeah.
think in Britain and Ireland, it's very common for when people to knock down, pegs that are sticking out. Any level of like doing anything that's a bit different, you're often knocked down for it. And I feel like I had a couple of sort of transcendent, transformational moments where I did something that was like so different to what my culture would have trained me to do. And it kind of got me out of that very rigid square
Mm.
thinking of like, you have to fit in, you should feel guilty for these things. I am, yeah, and I think that's, I've never had the most overwhelmingly in the moment psychedelic positive experience, but I think it's always had that, as you say, afterglow, refreshing moment of like individual agency. I think it has a huge impact on agency and how you think for yourself rather than think for others. Uh,
Totally. Resilience as well. I mean, yeah.
right. I'm curious. I'm so interested in these recurrent themes that you've seen going through this so many times with different people. Are there any other themes that have popped up either in situations where it's been enormously positive, even in situations where it's been negative? Like, are there any other recurring themes that you've seen doing this? Because I think that's a really unique perspective that you can share, just having
Mm.
seen so many.
Well, I got so kind of overexcited by seeing the theme of like the connection, the connectedness, and the So there were three themes that I saw that made me write a therapy model about it, because I was like, this is so important. It was the acceptance of emotion, the connection to self, others, and world, and embodiment. So those three themes were so felt so repeated and so prevalent that I then went and created this like integration model focusing on those themes. So then I haven't actually worked in psychedelic sitting. I haven't actually sat through a ceremony with somebody or a session for years now, because of these other themes that just took me away and made me want to
Right.
focus on those. So I don't know. I if I had been doing sitting all these years, I'm sure I would have found other themes that were seemed to be really important. But yeah, I got really obsessed with the A, the C, and the E.
Right.
Except
Talk.
body. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that more. Like, how does someone get the maximum benefits from psychedelics? How do they fully integrate that experience afterwards? Because I feel like sometimes it can feel so alien and can feel so detached and feel so strange that it can be hard to even explain a psychedelic experience after the fact. It can be hard to relate to it. It's a very just different experience. It's a very different subjective firsthand world.
Yeah.
Um, so how does someone integrate that fully? How does someone get the maximum benefits from a trip?
So I think it's well, I've created a kind of program that I feel is helping people do that. So I can kind of describe what that the kind of
Yeah,
element
please.
includes. Um, so I think being part of a community of other people that are also integrating this work is really important. So often people will have an experience. Sometimes you know other people that also take psychedelics that you can talk to, but often people don't. And even if you do know people that take psychedelics, they might not all be on the same kind of process as you. So what I suggest to people is that they find a year of their life where they can really focus on it. Like obviously carry on with everything else, their work and their relationships, but find a year of their life where they can, it doesn't have to be straight after a psychedelic experience. It's obviously great if it is, but where you can put aside, I don't know, maybe 4 hours a week, more if possible, but like put a chunk of
Wow.
aside every week to really focus on your integration process. And so it's a community of people where people sign up for a year, and they we have this kind of like monthly structure, essentially where people can choose which workshops they do. It's all online. So we have breath work. I talked before about breath work being a really good integration process, but we also have loads and loads of sharing circles. So sharing circles are a great way to integrate because it gives you an opportunity to speak your truth wherever you're at that week with what's going on in your life and be witnessed by understanding empathic others. You can talk about anything. You can talk about psychedelic experiences. You can talk about whatever feels important, but you also listen to them. So it's a shared process of seeing each other through this year-long process where you're all and people go to circles at different times. So it's not like you're always in the same circles with different people. The community's like it's about 300 people, but you're in a cohort of 50. So you've got like a smaller community within the community, and then you're also in a small group of 10. So you've got like your little home group, slightly bigger group for like the workshops, and then the whole community. And there are lots of different kind of workshops people do. We do lots of these guided imagery journeys, which are called tree journeys, which are they're kind of difficult to describe, but they're set to music and particular breathwork techniques, and you essentially ground yourself in this tree breathing, where you're kind of breathing up from the roots through your body up to your head, and kind of slowly merge with the tree, so you actually start to feel like a tree. And it's about nervous system regulation, but it's also about going to a kind of slightly different state. You kind of go to a very calm place, and then the different journeys have different focuses. So like one might be focused on gratitude, one might be focused on inner child healing, different kind of things. But people found those quite powerful. And then they have sharing circles afterwards. So it's essentially lots of different tools and workshops that people can join. Yeah, and they do it for a whole year. And it's the framework that we follow is 12 trees. So it was based on the Celtic tree calendar, which actually, with your Irish roots, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there's a different tree every month. and every tree has a different lesson. So we spend the whole month focusing on that lesson and then move on to the next lesson together.
Ah, very nice.
The Giant Shoulder mission is to explore radical ideas in biology, neuroscience, and consciousness, and elevate those stories to the highest possible level while keeping them accessible to everyone. If this interests you and you want to support independent science, then please consider subscribing to the Clips channel. Check out our 26 Neuroscience book. You can download it for free